was a passionate speech, not surprisingly. It's been a passionate 5 years and in particular, I suppose, the last few weeks. Was leading doctors into industrial action very difficult?
Doctors don't go into medicine to in any way harm or certainly even inconvenience patients. And I think it was a very difficult decision, and that's what I pointed out in my speech. And it's also why I hope that we can get a speedy resolution.
You said that you hoped that it would raise the issues and lead to further negotiations. Is it going to achieve that?
I think it's too early to say. I suspect in some ways, the government will be wanting to see what happens this week. My successor will be elected, there'll be a new council, they may want to see what happens. All I was trying to do is to say to all parties that we have to try and find a way through this as speedily as possible, because I don't think anybody in this institute wants to take further action that will inconvenience patients, if at all possible, if we can avoid that.
In fact, you went further in your speech and you called for careful thought about whether to take this further. What did you mean by that?
I don't think that's going further. I'm just saying, yes, it does require careful thought. I said, don't rush into further action or escalation. I didn't say it mustn't happen. Don't rush into it.
A number of doctors were quite shocked at the way that some sections of the press covered it, and there was quite aggressive reporting of doctors' personal circumstances. Do you think that reflected a public opinion of doctors that's changing?
I mean, in all my time as chairman of the BMA and even before, I've tried to keep personalities out of it. So it's a little disappointing when the other people, particularly the press, bring that in, because it's not really relevant to the argument. It distracts hugely from the argument. And yes, it's a little bit hurtful when you have your family and your home brought into these issues. But, I'm not going to let that deflect me from actually trying to deal with the real issues, which is trying to sort out the problems. And I think much more important is trying to resolve a dispute that is having a big impact on doctors, and trying to do it in a way that we don't have further inconvenience for patients.
Do you think that the public get it? Or do you think that they think you're just
Well, I think it's quite the complex argument, because as I was saying today, this is essentially, well, doctors feel it's about a betrayal of trust. It's about the fact that we had an agreement in 2008, which we felt not only coped with the problems then, but had a built-in safety valve for the future, in that any future pressures on the NHS pension scheme, particularly as doctors, would be taken and would be dealt with by the employees, by the doctors and nurses, not by the taxpayer, not by the government. And the government have walked away from that. And I think, of course, you can't ignore what else has been going on. Doctors in the third year of a pay freeze, increased pressures because of the funding crisis in the NHS, the major reorganisation of a Health and Social Care Act, and the fact that a lot of doctors are having to take on additional responsibilities. So if you put all these together, you can see why doctors are not particularly happy, and why pensions, in a way, was just the final straw in a whole chain of events.
You're still obviously very passionate about protecting the NHS. Do you feel that the NHS is under threat now? Because there is a sense of a feeling of apathy now that the bill has become act.
Well, I don't detect any apathy amongst doctors, and certainly amongst the BMA and the people here at the conference this week. As I said, I mean, any change and financial pressures and all of the other things, we do know put pressure on the philosophy behind the NHS, because if the NHS can't work properly, can't provide properly, then those who can afford to might decide to opt out, and that would be very dangerous for the NHS. The point I was trying to make, though, is that you shouldn't just say that X legislation or Y financial cut means the end of the NHS. The NHS is about people. It's about doctors, nurses, other health workers, and primarily it's about patients. And if patients and the public and doctors and nurses really want the NHS to succeed, then I think they can. But, it won't happen easily, it won't happen by default. It's something you've got to work for, even got to fight for. And that's what I was trying to stress. So don't give up just because the bill has become an act. Still keep fighting, still keep promoting the arguments, and still keep trying to change the aspects of policy of this government and indeed of previous governments that we feel work against the NHS.
Has it been a good 5 years?
it's certainly been an interesting 5 years. Good, bad, indifferent. I mean, as I mentioned, it's the highs and lows. It's like anything else in life, but it's been a particularly challenging 5 years. I took over at a difficult time with MMC and MTAS. And then we've seen a whole lot of things going on through that, whether it be increase in tuition fees, problems still around training, the whole health and social care bill, now pensions, pay freezes. So an awful lot going on. But what I was trying to say is that even amongst all that might be considered as the doom and the gloom, there have been high points as well. I think on our professional side we've done a lot. We've seen the smoking ban in public places being implemented. We've seen more steps hopefully to deal with things like alcohol. And I think we've seen reasons that we can still be hopeful and still be optimistic. And I think my main parting message was, don't lose that, and particularly don't we rather older, more cynical doctors actually infuse our younger colleagues with that sense of sort of disillusionment and world weariness, because I see huge enthusiasm amongst the medical students and young doctors. I see huge commitment. I see a huge sense of vocation, a huge sense of professional pride. And we really have to build on that. We have to support them. We have to encourage them, because they're the future, and they're the people who are going to have to look after me in my old age. So there is a personal interest in this as well, but there's a much wider professional interest in ensuring that that happens.
Dr. Hamish Meldrum, thank you.
Thank you.